forever. מתוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
A labor Zionist, Ben-Gurion was committed to socialist principles, which he ingrained in all aspects of society during Israel's formative years. Perhaps the best known of the resulting public institutions is the quintessential Israeli kibbutz, whereas the country's economy was for decades dominated by state-owned and business cooperatives. Ben-Gurion also envisioned Jewish immigration to and development of the sparsely populated Negev desert. He is also the leader who devised the so-called status quo regarding the government's interaction with religious Jews, an element of which allowed what was then a small population to defer military service in favor of Torah study. Ben-Gurion was known for his terseness, stubbornness, as well as, at times, ruthlessness. To a large degree, these characteristics were responsible for his notorious dislike of the Israeli right, born out of revisionist Zionism and led by Menachem Begin. Overall, however, as Israelis commemorated on Monday the 40th anniversary of the death of their first leader, the focus was on Ben-Gurion the hero, as well as the living, breathing state that he forged and then bequeathed to us.
We're joined in studio by journalist Uri Misgav of Haaretz. Good morning, Uri. And by co-founder of the Or movement, Ofir Fisher. Thank you for joining us this morning. Uri, I want to start with you because you wrote this, amazing, fabulous, I'm going to flatter you a little bit, almost a dissertation about the man a few months ago, a while ago. And, David Ben-Gurion, I think if you're living in Israel, he's well known in the consciences, but also internationally as, almost one of the founder of this country. But had a very tragic end that was always my sense of it, that became, towards the end, somewhat of a ridiculed figure. Can we look at his life legacy as that?
I wouldn't say tragic ending, but more kind of decline. Ben-Gurion was declining, but was declining slowly, actually, over a decade. It's very symbolic that his last term at the Knesset was as a single member of parliament. That tells the whole story.
I mean, he ran again at the age of 83, right, or something like that, and then tried to get into the
had no supporters and no support, and then finished his life quite isolated and quite frustrated, and that brings a taste of tragedy.
And then touching on that point, it is, he had been quoted as saying that he'd been disappointed by where Israel was heading. Can you pinpoint that for me? Disappointed in what? In what things specifically?
We have to try and be careful, because I don't know if we can segregate the disappointment from the Israeli project by Ben-Gurion and the personal disappointment.
Right.
He was frustrated. He couldn't even write his memoir the way he wanted. He wrote it, but then he noticed that nobody cares anymore or wants to read more about it. But I think when we talk about his national disappointment, I would say two words: leadership and unity, or maybe lack of leadership and lack of unity that he saw in the last decade of his life, and I think we experience from his death.
Which sadly, lack of unity is something that we can describe the Israeli government today. But let's move a bit forward. Ofir, you are part of the Or movement, and I'm going to let you first explain the Or movement being a movement that actually glorifies or follows in Ben-Gurion footsteps in the Negev, right? How so? What do you guys do?
The Or movement is a non-for-profit organization that its whole goal is to develop and populate the Negev and the Galilee. So now we are focusing on Ben-Gurion, so we'll focus on the Negev, but we are active both in the Negev and the Galilee, following Ben-Gurion footsteps, moving to the Negev, trying to create a trend to bring the young generation and develop this area.
Now, in terms of that, Uri, Ben-Gurion moved to the Negev. I'm just going to let you tell us the story because he thought that was the future of Israel there, no?
There's so many explanations to why he did it. And did he actually move there by heart? And of course he did it, and he thought that's, as Ofir thinks, that's the place to go. We have no room in the center of Israel for ages. And what happened that he went there and he said, "Go after me," and when he looked over his shoulder, nobody came.
Was following.
And maybe that's what these guys are trying to fix.
No, and
the last decade.
Exactly. Negev being Israel proper, that's what we refer to in news terms as something that's not occupied territory.
Right. And this brings me also to what Uri just said, that perhaps one of the reasons that Ben-Gurion was disappointed was about the unity. One of the main reasons that we decided to do what we are doing is because of that. It's because we figured out that there is a huge need in Israel. After a few decades that there was no, I would say, new vision or new challenge for the young generation that can bring together everybody. It doesn't matter if you're secular or religious, right wing or left wing, but the only thing that can actually do it is if you reconnect to the land of Israel in places which are under a consensus and undisputed. And I think that we see it along the days how it connects people, and mixed communities are being established, and people are reconnecting to the land of Israel around this new vision, and it's amazing to see the change that it makes.
Do you have, sadly we have not much time, do you have a lot of support? Do you have a lot of followers? Because, I have to say it hasn't fared so well for, to cling on, other than the need to cling on to the vision of the Negev being the place to populate.
Look, it's not easy, and definitely there is a room for a lot to do, to be done there. When we started in '99 and we established the first town in the Negev, 20 years after no new communities were established there, it was literally a desert, not only by the climate, but also a desert of people, desert of bodies and entities that are looking into this area and trying to create a difference. And we came and we started to rebrand this area, to establish new towns, to bring some new life to this area. And slowly, this trend, and you can see today that you cannot compare what's happening today to what was there 10 years ago. You have a ministry, you have other organizations.
Changes that were definitely made by that. Thank you so much. Possibly the new Zionism. Always a pleasure to have you here. When we get back, no social network inspired as much loyalty from its users as Twitter. And we'll take a look at the reasons.